Hello, friends. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Here, I share a brand new story every day. If you enjoy my videos, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's dive into today's story. Evelyn gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white as she navigated the winding roads that led to her new home in the remote town of Willow Grove. The relentless rain pattered against the windshield, adding to the growing sense of unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach ever since she'd first glimpsed the town's sign on the horizon. Something about this place felt off, a palpable undercurrent of darkness that seemed to seep through the very fabric of the landscape. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was venturing into unknown, dangerous territory, a far cry from the fresh start she had hoped to find. As she pulled up to a modest, ramshackle-looking house, Evelyn took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. This was it, her new home, a blank slate where she could finally leave the demons of her past behind. Gathering her courage, she stepped out of the car, her boots sinking into the muddy earth. The first thing that struck her was the eerie silence that hung over the town. No children's laughter, no barking dogs, not even the distant rumble of a car engine. Just an unsettling quiet that seemed to swallow up every sound. Evelyn made her way to the front door, pausing for a moment before lifting the rusted knocker and letting it fall with a dull thud. She waited, heartbeat pounding in her ears, until the door swung open to reveal a man in his mid-30s wearing a warm, friendly smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Willow Grove," the man exclaimed, stepping aside to usher her in. "I'm Ethan, your next-door neighbor. I saw you pull up and figured I'd come say hello." Evelyn managed a tentative smile, shuffling through the doorway and into the dimly lit interior of the house. "Thanks. It's nice to meet you, Ethan. I'm Evelyn." "Evelyn, wonderful to meet you," Ethan replied, closing the door behind her. "I hope the move went well. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you get settled in." Evelyn glanced around the living room, taking in the sparse furnishings and the thick layer of dust that seemed to cling to every surface. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but I'm sure I can make it work." Ethan chuckled, his gaze sweeping over the room. "Yeah, the houses around here have seen better days, that's for sure. But don't worry, I'll be around to lend a hand if you need it." Something about Ethan's overeager demeanor put Evelyn on edge, but she forced herself to nod and smile. "I appreciate that, really. It's just me, so I could use the help." Of course," Ethan said, clasping his hands together. "Well, I'll let you get settled in. If you need anything at all, you know where to find me." As Ethan showed himself out, Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine. The way he had looked at her, almost as if he was sizing her up, unsettled her in a way she couldn't quite explain. Shaking off the feeling, she turned her attention to the task at hand, determined to make this place feel like a home. Unpacking her meager belongings, Evelyn couldn't help but notice the eerie silence that seemed to permeate the house. No creaking floorboards, no distant sounds of life from the neighboring homes. Just an oppressive quiet that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. As night fell, Evelyn found herself repeatedly glancing out the window, her gaze drawn to the dense forest that surrounded the town. The trees loomed like towering sentinels, their bare branches reaching up towards the inky black sky. Something about the way the shadows seemed to shift and dance across the forest floor made her heart race with a sense of nameless dread. Just as she was about to turn away, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Evelyn held her breath, squinting into the darkness, and that's when she saw it. A dark, amorphous shape gliding between the trees, vanishing into the gloom before she could get a proper look. Evelyn's hands trembled as she pulled the curtains closed, her mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. What was that? Was it her imagination, or had she truly seen something otherworldly lurking in the forest? Shaking her head, Evelyn tried to push the unsettling encounter from her mind. She was probably just tired from the long drive, and her overactive imagination was playing tricks on her. Still, as she lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a grave mistake in coming to Willow Grove. The hours ticked by, and Evelyn drifted in and out of an uneasy sleep. This got her dreams plagued by visions of the shadowy figure in the woods. Just as she was beginning to drift off, a sudden noise from outside jolted her awake. Evelyn sat up, heart pounding, and listened intently. At first, there was nothing, just the eerie silence that had enveloped the town. But then she heard it, a faint scratching sound, like claws against wood, coming from somewhere just beyond her window. Pulse racing, Evelyn slowly inched towards the curtains, her hand trembling as she grasped the fabric. With a deep breath, she pulled them back, peering out into the inky blackness of the night. For a moment, she saw nothing. The forest, an impenetrable wall of shadows. But then, a shape materialized, a dark, hulking form that seemed to melt out of the darkness. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she caught a glimpse of glowing, inhuman eyes and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. With a panicked gasp, she stumbled back, her mind reeling. What the hell was that? Evelyn's hands shook as she fumbled for the light switch, flooding the room with a warm, reassuring glow. As the room came into focus, Evelyn scanned the window, but the shadowy figure had vanished, leaving no trace of its existence. She stared out at the forest, half expecting the creature to reappear, but the only movement was the gentle sway of the branches in the wind. Shaking her head, Evelyn tried to convince herself that it had all been a figment of her imagination, a product of her overactive mind. But deep down she knew that what she had seen was all too real, and that the true horrors of Willow Grove had only just begun. Evelyn awoke with a start, the unnatural stillness of the night broken by the faint sound of rustling in the trees outside her window. Heart pounding, she sat up and peered into the inky darkness, straining to make out any movement. The dense forest that surrounded Willow Grove seemed to press in on her small house, its twisted branches almost scraping against the glass. After a few tense moments, Evelyn saw nothing out of the ordinary and tried to calm her nerves. "It's just the wind," she whispered to herself, though she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had crept up her spine. Shaking off her disquiet, she got up and made her way to the kitchen, hoping a warm cup of tea would settle her racing thoughts. As Evelyn waited for the kettle to boil, she caught a glimpse of the local newspaper on the counter. The headline caught her eye: "Another resident vanishes in Willow Grove." Feeling a surge of unease, she quickly scanned the article, which reported that a young woman named Sarah had gone missing the previous night, her car found abandoned on the edge of the forest. The authorities were investigating, but the townspeople, as usual, seemed reluctant to provide any information. Evelyn's mind raced. Could this latest disappearance be connected to the strange atmosphere she'd felt since arriving in Willow Grove? Eager to learn more, she decided to venture out and try to gather information despite the late hour. Pulling on a jacket, Evelyn stepped out into the chilly night, the crunch of gravel under her feet the only sound breaking the eerie silence. As she approached the town center, she noticed the lights were on in the sheriff's station. Gathering her courage, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Grady, looked up from his desk, his expression one of mild irritation. "Ma'am, it's pretty late. What can I do for you?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to broach the subject. I read about the latest disappearance in the paper. I was hoping you could tell me more about what happened." Grady sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "Look, I know you're new in town, but these kinds of things happen from time to time. There's no need to get yourself worked up over it." "But don't you find it concerning that people keep vanishing?" Evelyn pressed, sensing a hint of evasiveness in the sheriff's tone. Grady's jaw tightened. "Of course it's concerning, but we're doing everything we can to investigate. The truth is, these folks sometimes wander off on their own, and we find them eventually." He paused, fixing Evelyn with a stern look. "I'd advise you to mind your own business and not go poking around where you don't belong." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine at the underlying threat in the sheriff's words. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to cause any trouble. I'm just curious, that's all." She turned to leave, but Grady's voice stopped her. "Look, miss." He paused, waiting for her to provide her name. "Evelyn," she supplied. "Evelyn," Grady continued. "I know you're new here, and you're probably used to a different way of doing things. But in Willow Grove, we take care of our own. The best thing you can do is mind your own business and let us handle it." Evelyn nodded, sensing that further argument would be futile. "All right, Sheriff, I'll do that." As she stepped back out into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something the sheriff wasn't telling her. Returning home, Evelyn made her tea, but found herself unable to relax. The information she'd gleaned from the newspaper article and her conversation with Grady only served to deepen the mystery. Why were the townspeople so reluctant to discuss the disappearances? And what was the sheriff hiding? Evelyn spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, her mind racing with questions. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, she made a decision. If the authorities weren't willing to take this seriously, she would have to investigate on her own. After a fitful breakfast, Evelyn set out to explore the town, determined to uncover the truth. She wandered the streets, taking note of the dilapidated buildings and the general air of neglect that seemed to permeate Willow Grove. The few locals she encountered eyed her warily, quickly averting their gaze or muttering under their breath as she passed. Evelyn's curiosity drew her to the edge of the forest, where she noticed a weathered sign warning of danger and keep out. Glancing around to make sure she wasn't being watched, she stepped past the barrier and into the dense foliage, following a faint trail that led deeper into the woods. The further she ventured, the more unsettled Evelyn became. The air seemed to grow colder and heavier, and the twisted, gnarled branches of the trees seemed to reach out towards her. She paused, suddenly aware of a strange, unnatural silence that had fallen over the forest. No birds chirped, no small animals scurried underfoot. An eerie stillness permeated the air. Evelyn's heart pounded as she slowly turned, scanning her surroundings. That's when she noticed it, a series of strange markings carved into the bark of a nearby tree. Furrowing her brow, she stepped closer to inspect them, running her fingers over the intricate geometric patterns. They seemed almost deliberate, as if placed there for a specific purpose. Evelyn was just about to reach out and touch the markings when a sudden, unsettling noise made her freeze. It was a low, guttural sound like the distant growl of some wild animal. Panic rising in her chest, Evelyn whirled around and began to retrace her steps, desperate to escape the forest and its unseen dangers. As she burst back onto the main road, Evelyn nearly collided with a familiar figure. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, clutching at her racing heart. Her neighbor smiled warmly, seemingly unfazed by her disheveled appearance. "Evelyn, I was just coming to check on you. I saw you heading into the woods and got worried." Evelyn eyed him suspiciously. I was just exploring a bit, trying to get a feel for the town, you know." She hesitated, then asked, Have you noticed anything strange about Willow Grove?" Ethan's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his features. "Strange? Not at all. This is a peaceful, quiet little town, perfect for someone looking to start fresh." He placed a hand on her arm, his grip surprisingly firm. "But you should be careful wandering around alone, especially in the woods. There are all sorts of dangers out there." Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine at the subtle emphasis on the word dangers. Nodding slowly, she made her way back to her house, her mind racing with more questions than answers. As she closed the door behind her, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. There was something deeply wrong in Willow Grove, and she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Evelyn craned her neck, peering down the darkened alleyway as the last rays of daylight faded. The businesses lining Main Street had closed hours ago, leaving the town shrouded in an unsettling hush. She pulled her jacket tighter, cursing herself for venturing out alone after witnessing the tense exchange she had overheard earlier. The locals' hostility and unwillingness to discuss the recent disappearances only heightened her suspicions that something sinister was unfolding in Willow Grove. Evelyn knew she needed to get to the bottom of this mystery, even if it meant facing the town's resistance and hostility head-on. Steeling her nerves, she continued her exploration, ducking down side streets and peering into the windows of abandoned buildings. The deeper she ventured into the town's forgotten corners, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Shadows seemed to lengthen, and the air grew thick with a sense of unease. At the edge of the town, Evelyn discovered an old, dilapidated factory, its once bustling facade now crumbling and overgrown. Driven by a mix of curiosity and trepidation, she pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The interior was dark and musty, debris and cobwebs covering the floor. Evelyn's footsteps echoed eerily as she navigated the seemingly abandoned space, her senses on high alert. As she rounded a corner, she froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Scrawled on the wall in a dark, viscous substance were strange symbols and glyphs, their meaning entirely foreign to her. Evelyn's fingertips traced the markings with a mixture of fascination and dread. What could this place be used for? And who or what had created these disturbing etchings? She quickly snapped a few photographs with her phone, hoping they might provide some clues, when a sudden movement in the shadows caused her to jump. Evelyn spun around, her eyes scanning the darkness, but she saw nothing. The oppressive silence of the factory pressed in around her, and she realized she needed to get out of here, and fast. Rushing back to the exit, Evelyn burst out into the fading daylight, sucking in deep breaths of fresh air. She paused, her hands shaking, before making her way back towards the main part of town. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. When Evelyn finally reached her apartment, she found Sheriff Grady waiting for her on the front steps, his expression stern. "I thought I made it clear you should stay out of this investigation," Grady said, his voice low and gruff. Evelyn straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm sorry, Sheriff, but I can't just ignore what's happening in this town. People are disappearing, and no one seems willing to talk about it." Grady's brow furrowed, and he let out a heavy sigh. "Look, I get that you're curious, but trust me when I say you're better off keeping your head down and not asking too many questions. This town has a way of dealing with outsiders who stick their noses where they don't belong." I can't do that, Sheriff," Evelyn replied, her voice resolute. "I've seen things, strange things, and I think there's more going on here than you're willing to admit." Grady studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "All right, then. If you're hell-bent on getting yourself into trouble, at least let me know what you've found." Evelyn quickly recounted her discoveries at the abandoned factory, showing Grady the photographs she had taken. The sheriff's face grew grim as he examined the images, his brow furrowing in concentration. "This is troubling," Grady murmured, handing the phone back to Evelyn. "I've seen symbols like these before, but never in Willow Grove. Whatever's going on, it's not good." "Then help me figure it out," Evelyn pleaded. "I know you're just trying to protect the town, but if there's a real threat here, we need to confront it, not bury our heads in the sand." Grady studied her for a long moment, his expression conflicted. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, fine. But you stay close to me and you do exactly as I say, understood? This town doesn't take kindly to outsiders poking around in its business." Evelyn nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Sheriff. I promise I won't let you down." As Grady turned to leave, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Glancing over her shoulder, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure in the shadows. Ethan, her neighbor, his gaze fixed on her with an unreadable expression. Evelyn shuddered, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Whatever dark secrets Willow Grove was hiding, she was certain that Ethan was deeply involved. With a newfound sense of determination, she steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead, resolved to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Evelyn couldn't shake the sense that something was deeply wrong in Willow Grove. The disappearances, the eerie atmosphere, and the hostility she faced from the townspeople, it all pointed to a sinister underbelly lurking beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic small town. Determined to uncover the truth, Evelyn decided to explore the abandoned factory on the outskirts of Willow Grove, a location she had noticed during her previous wanderings. The old, dilapidated building had an unsettling aura about it, and Evelyn couldn't help but feel drawn to it, as if it held the key to the town's dark secrets. Leaving her modest rental home, Evelyn made her way through the winding roads, the dense forest closing in around her. The further she ventured from the town center, the more the air seemed to thicken with a palpable sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, her every step observed by unseen eyes. As Evelyn approached the factory, she was struck by its imposing, crumbling facade. Weeds and vines had overtaken the once bustling industrial site, and the broken windows gave the structure an almost haunted appearance. Steeling her nerves, Evelyn carefully made her way through the overgrown entrance, her footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The interior of the factory was a maze of rusting machinery and debris. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that filtered through the grimy windows, casting an ethereal glow over the abandoned workspace. Evelyn's footsteps crunched on the debris-strewn floor as she explored the various rooms, her eyes scanning for any clues that might shed light on the town's dark secrets. In one of the larger rooms, Evelyn discovered a series of strange symbols and markings etched into the concrete walls. Her heart pounding, she traced her fingers over the unfamiliar sigils, a chill running down her spine. These were no ordinary graffiti. The symbols were intentional, deliberate, and seemingly imbued with a sinister energy. As Evelyn studied the markings, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the far end of the room. Whirling around, she caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure darting behind a pile of discarded machinery. Panic rising in her chest, Evelyn moved to investigate, her steps quickening as the sense of being watched grew more intense. Rounding the corner, Evelyn found herself face to face with a sight that made her blood run cold. In the dimly lit corner, she could make out the crumpled remains of a human body. Evelyn stifled a scream, her hands flying to her mouth as she recoiled in horror. Somewhere in the distance, she heard a low, guttural growl and the sound of something large moving through the shadows. Evelyn's heart pounded in her ears as she frantically searched for an escape, her eyes darting around the room. Spotting a partially open door on the far side, she quickly made her way towards it, her steps echoing through the cavernous space. Just as Evelyn reached the door, she felt a sudden searing pain in her leg, and she collapsed to the ground with a cry. Glancing down, she saw that her calf had been injured. Adrenaline coursing through her, Evelyn forced herself to her feet and limped through the doorway, slamming it shut behind her and barricading it with whatever debris she could find. Gasping for breath, Evelyn took in her surroundings, realizing she had stumbled into a small, enclosed office space. Frantically, she searched for a way out, her eyes landing on a grimy window. Mustering her strength, she pushed it open and hoisted herself through, her injured leg protesting with each movement. Evelyn tumbled onto the overgrown ground outside, her hands and knees scraping against the rough terrain. Glancing back at the factory, she could see the shadows shifting, as if the very walls were alive and aware of her presence. Gritting her teeth against the pain, she pushed herself to her feet and began to limp back towards the town. Her mind racing with a million unanswered questions. As Evelyn made her way back, she knew she had to find Sheriff Grady and show him the disturbing evidence she had uncovered. Whatever was lurking within the abandoned factory, it was clear that the town's dark secrets were far more sinister than she had imagined, and she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Evelyn's mind raced as she walked the streets of Willow Grove, replaying the unsettling encounters she'd had since arriving in the strange town. The hostility from the locals, the disappearances, and now the cryptic message she'd discovered. It all pointed to something deeply wrong lurking beneath the surface. As she reached her small rental home, Evelyn noticed the familiar figure of Ethan waiting on her doorstep. His friendly smile did little to ease the unease pooling in her stomach. "Evelyn, I was hoping I'd catch you. I wanted to see how you're settling in," Ethan said, his tone impossibly genial. Evelyn eyed him warily. "I'm doing all right, I suppose, though I have to admit this town has me a bit on edge." Ethan's brow furrowed in an expression of concern. "Oh dear, I hope the townsfolk haven't been giving you a hard time. We can be a bit private at times, but I assure you we mean well." "That's the impression I'm getting," Evelyn replied, choosing her words carefully. "Speaking of which, do you happen to know anything about the disappearances I've been hearing about?" Ethan's expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of unease crossing his features before the easy smile returned. "Disappearances? I'm afraid I don't know anything about that. This is such a quiet, peaceful town. I can't imagine anything untoward happening here." Evelyn studied him, unconvinced. "Really? Because I saw a strange message scratched into a tree at the edge of the forest, and I can't help but feel it's connected to all of this." Ethan's eyes widened momentarily before he quickly schooled his features. "Now, Evelyn, I wouldn't go poking around in the forest if I were you. It can be a dangerous place, full of wild animals and other hazards." His tone was pleasant, but there was an undercurrent of warning. Evelyn held his gaze, unwilling to be deterred. I appreciate your concern, Ethan, but I'm not going to just ignore what's happening here. The sheriff is looking into it as well, and I intend to help however I can. Ethan's smile tightened. The sheriff, you say? Well, I suppose that's good if he's taking an interest. But I must insist that you leave the investigating to the proper authorities. This town, it's not the kind of place where outsiders should be sticking their noses where they don't belong. Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine at the subtle threat in his words. I understand your concern, Ethan, but I'm not going to be intimidated. If there's something going on here that's putting people in danger, I need to know the truth. Ethan sighed, his expression softening. Evelyn, I assure you, there's nothing to worry about. Willow Grove is a safe, peaceful place. The disappearances are surely just a misunderstanding, or perhaps the result of people moving away, as they sometimes do in small towns. Why don't you join me for dinner tonight? I'd be happy to introduce you to some of the other locals, and you can see for yourself how welcoming our community is. Evelyn hesitated, torn between her instinctive distrust of Ethan and her desire to integrate into the town. I appreciate the offer, Ethan, but I think I'll have to pass. I have some other plans tonight. Ethan's smile faltered, and Evelyn saw a flash of annoyance in his eyes. Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me. He turned and walked away, his retreating figure disappearing down the street. Evelyn watched him go, a growing sense of unease settling in the pit of her stomach. Something about Ethan's behavior was deeply unsettling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Determined to uncover the truth, Evelyn decided to pay a visit to the local sheriff's office. As she made her way through the town, she noticed the wary glances and hushed whispers of the passing residents, further reinforcing her suspicion that Willow Grove was harboring a dark secret. When Evelyn arrived at the sheriff's office, she was greeted by the weathered face of Sheriff Grady. He looked up from his desk, his expression one of mild surprise. Miss Evelyn, he said, his voice gruff, I wasn't expecting to see you back so soon. What can I do for you? Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. Sheriff, I've been doing some investigating of my own, and I think I may have uncovered something significant. I need your help to get to the bottom of what's really going on in this town. Grady leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. Listen, I understand you're new here and all, but this isn't the kind of place where outsiders should be sticking their noses where they don't belong. The disappearances are being handled, and I can assure you there's nothing to worry about. Evelyn shook her head. With all due respect, Sheriff, I don't think that's true. I've seen and heard things that suggest there's a much darker truth at play here. And I'm not the only one who's noticed. The townspeople seem to be hiding something. Grady's expression darkened, and he let out a heavy sigh. Look, I know this town can be a bit insular, but the folks around here, they've got their reasons for keeping to themselves, and they don't take kindly to outsiders poking around, asking questions. Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. Sheriff, I'm not going to just ignore what's happening. People are disappearing, and I can't stand by and do nothing. If you won't help me, I'll figure it out on my own. Grady studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. Finally, he let out a resigned grunt. All right. I can see you're not the type to be easily discouraged, but I'm telling you, this isn't going to be easy. The townspeople, they've got a way of closing ranks, and they don't take kindly to anyone stirring up trouble. Evelyn felt a surge of relief, tempered by the weight of Grady's warning. I understand the risks, Sheriff, but I have to try. There's something deeply wrong in this town, and I can't just walk away from it. Grady nodded slowly, a hint of grudging respect in his eyes. All right, then, let's see what we can dig up. But I'm warning you, Evelyn, be careful. This town has a way of burrowing under your skin and not letting go. As Evelyn left the sheriff's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil. But with Grady's reluctant partnership, she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Evelyn's heart raced as she and Sheriff Grady crept through the dense forest, the oppressive silence broken only by the snap of twigs beneath their feet. The air felt thick with the weight of unspoken dread, and Evelyn couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. They had followed a tip from a reluctant townsperson who had revealed the location of a secret gathering deep in the woods. Evelyn's initial investigation had uncovered hints of a dark ritual taking place, and now, against her better judgment, she found herself venturing into the heart of Willow Grove's sinister underbelly. As they drew closer, the sound of distant chanting reached their ears, growing louder with each step. Evelyn glanced at Grady, who nodded grimly, his hand instinctively resting on the holster of his sidearm. They slowed their pace, moving stealthily between the towering trees until a dim light flickered into view through the foliage. Crouching behind a tangle of bushes, Evelyn and Grady peered out onto a small clearing. A circle of robed figures stood in the center, their faces obscured by the shadows, swaying in sync as they chanted in a language Evelyn couldn't recognize. In the middle of the circle, a large stone altar stood, adorned with strange symbols and arcane artifacts. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she recognized one of the robed figures. Ethan, her seemingly friendly neighbor, was among them. Her suspicions about his true nature had been confirmed, and a chill ran down her spine. Grady leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever they're doing, it's not good. We need to get out of here, get back up, and come back with a plan." But Evelyn couldn't tear her eyes away from the ritual, a morbid fascination gripping her. She watched, transfixed, as the chanting reached a crescendo, the figures moving with increasing fervor. Suddenly, a shudder seemed to ripple through the entire clearing, and Evelyn swore she felt a presence, a dark and ancient force, descend upon them. Before Evelyn could react, a twig snapped beneath her foot, and the chanting abruptly ceased. Dozens of hooded heads turned in their direction, and Evelyn's heart sank as she realized they had been discovered. "Run!" Grady shouted, grabbing Evelyn's arm and yanking her to her feet. They fled through the trees, branches snagging at their clothes as they heard the thundering footsteps of their pursuers close behind. Evelyn's lungs burned, her legs aching, as they darted through the maze of towering pines. She could feel the weight of the entity's presence bearing down on them, a malevolent force that seemed to twist the very fabric of reality. The air crackled with an unseen energy, and Evelyn swore she caught glimpses of shadowy figures flickering between the trees. Grady led them through a series of winding paths, his years of experience navigating the local terrain giving them a slight advantage. But Evelyn knew it was only a matter of time before their pursuers caught up with them. As they rounded a sharp turn, Evelyn nearly collided with a figure standing in their path. She recoiled, her heart pounding, only to realize it was the kindly shopkeeper from earlier, his weathered face etched with a grave expression. "This way," he murmured, gesturing to a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest. "Hurry, before they find you." Grady didn't hesitate, yanking Evelyn along as they followed the man's lead. The new path was more overgrown and treacherous, but it seemed to throw off their pursuers, their shouts and the sounds of their approach gradually fading into the distance. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a small clearing, the shopkeeper ushering them towards an old, dilapidated cabin. "You'll be safe here for now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you must leave Willow Grove before the darkness claims you as well." Evelyn and Grady exchanged a look, their breathing ragged. Grady opened his mouth to speak, but the shopkeeper raised a weathered hand to silence him. "There's no time to explain. Just know that what you've witnessed tonight is only the beginning. The entity that controls this town is ancient and powerful, and it will stop at nothing to preserve its hold over Willow Grove." Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine. What is this entity, and why does it want to control the town? The shopkeeper's expression darkened. It feeds on the fear and suffering of the townspeople, maintaining a symbiotic relationship with Willow Grove. As long as the residents continue to uphold their end of a dark pact, the entity will spare them. But those who defy it... He shook his head solemnly. Grady stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "So how do we stop it? There has to be a way to break this hold to free the town from its grasp." The shopkeeper's gaze was grave. "I'm afraid the task may be far more daunting than you realize. The entity's power is ancient and deeply rooted in Willow Grove. To confront it directly would require a level of courage and sacrifice that few possess." Evelyn felt a lump forming in her throat. "But we have to try. We can't just leave the people of this town to suffer under its control." The shopkeeper nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Then you must be prepared for the true horrors that lie ahead. The entity will not relinquish its grip on Willow Grove without a fight that may cost you more than you're willing to give." Evelyn steeled her resolve, her determination hardening in the face of the shopkeeper's ominous warning. "We have to try," she repeated, her voice steady, "for the sake of this town and everyone we've lost." Grady placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression mirroring her own. "Then let's get to work. We don't have a moment to lose." As they stepped into the cabin, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were entering a battle that would test the very limits of their courage and resolve. The true horror of Willow Grove was only just beginning to reveal itself, and she knew that confronting it would require every ounce of strength and resilience they possessed. Evelyn's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of information she and Sheriff Grady had uncovered about Willow Grove's dark secrets. The town's insular nature, the disappearances, the strange symbols she had seen, it all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple series of random occurrences. After their harrowing encounter in the woods, Evelyn and Grady retreated to the safety of the sheriff's office, both trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. Grady, his usually stoic demeanor cracking, sat across from Evelyn, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "This goes deeper than I ever imagined," Grady said, his voice low and laced with a hint of apprehension. "I've policed this town for over 20 years, and I thought I knew its secrets. But what we saw out there—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Evelyn leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly. "Sheriff, you have to tell me what you know. I need to understand what's going on in this place." Grady sighed heavily, the weight of his years of service etched into the lines of his face. "It all started decades ago when the town struck some kind of dark bargain. The disappearances, the strange occurrences, they're all part of it, a twisted ritual to appease a malevolent force that's taking control of Willow Grove." Evelyn's eyes widened as the pieces began to fall into place. "That ritual we witnessed, the townspeople, the symbols, it was all connected, wasn't it? They're feeding this entity, this supernatural force, with the lives of the people who disappear." Grady nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. The town sold its soul, in a manner of speaking, to ensure its prosperity and survival. But the price has been unbearable. Generation after generation has been sacrificed to maintain the pact." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "And you've known about this all along? Why didn't you do anything?" The sheriff's gaze fell to the floor, his expression laden with regret. "I tried, Evelyn. I've investigated these disappearances for years, but every time I hit a wall. The townspeople, they're complicit in this, bound by their own fear and the need to preserve the town's way of life. Any attempt to expose the truth has been met with hostility, even violence. I'm the law here, but even I'm powerless against the forces that control this place." Evelyn shook her head in disbelief. "So you're just going to let this continue? Let more innocent people be taken?" Grady's eyes met hers, filled with a resolute determination. "No, not this time. Seeing what we saw out there, knowing the full extent of the town's depravity, I can't turn a blind eye anymore. We have to stop this, Evelyn, but I can't do it alone." Evelyn felt a surge of purpose ignite within her. "Then I'm with you. I won't let this town destroy any more lives, not if I can help it." The sheriff nodded, a slight glimmer of hope in his weary gaze. "Good, because we're going to need all the help we can get. This entity, this darkness that's taken root in Willow Grove, it's been here for decades, and it's not going to give up its hold without a fight." Evelyn's mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. "Do you know anything about the nature of this force? What kind of creature are we dealing with?" Grady leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "I'm afraid the details are murky, lost to time and the town's collective silence. But from what I've pieced together over the years, it's an ancient, malevolent entity. A dark, primordial force that feeds on fear, suffering, and the despair of the human soul." Evelyn felt a chill run through her. "And it's been preying on the people of Willow Grove all this time?" "Yes," Grady said solemnly. The townspeople, out of a twisted sense of loyalty and self-preservation, have perpetuated this unholy bargain, sacrificing their own to maintain the entity's grip on the town. It's a vicious cycle, one that's only grown stronger with each passing year. Evelyn's thoughts turned to Ethan, her seemingly friendly neighbor whose true nature had been slowly revealed. "Ethan," she said, her voice laced with accusation. "He's connected to all of this, isn't he?" Grady nodded grimly. "From what I've gathered, Ethan is the entity's human representative, the one who coordinates the town's offerings and ensures the pact is upheld. He's the gatekeeper, so to speak, the one who keeps the darkness fed and the town under its control." Evelyn felt a surge of dread and determination. "Then that's where we start. We have to find a way to expose Ethan's true nature and break this pact once and for all." Grady leaned forward, his expression grave. "It won't be easy, Evelyn. Ethan is a cunning, manipulative individual, and he has the full weight of the town's allegiance behind him. Not to mention, the entity itself will fight tooth and nail to maintain its hold on Willow Grove." Evelyn met the sheriff's gaze, her own eyes steeled with resolve. "I don't care. I've come too far to back down now. This town has taken enough from me. From all of us. It's time we take it back." Grady nodded, a glimmer of respect shining in his eyes. "Then let's get to work. The clock is ticking and we need to uncover the full extent of the town's dark history if we have any hope of stopping this evil." The two spent the rest of the afternoon poring over old records, newspaper clippings, and any other information they could find about Willow Grove's past. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she pieced together the disturbing timeline, each new revelation more horrifying than the last. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the sheriff's office, Evelyn and Grady finally had a clearer picture of the town's dark pact and the entity that controlled it. The details were chilling, the implications even more so. "This goes back generations," Evelyn murmured, her voice tinged with a mixture of dread and determination. "The town has been sacrificing its own people to this thing for decades. And Ethan, he's been at the center of it all, orchestrating the disappearances and maintaining the pact." Grady nodded solemnly. "It's worse than I ever imagined. This entity, it's an ancient primal force, a manifestation of humanity's darkest impulses and deepest fears, and it's been using Willow Grove as its personal feeding ground for far too long." Evelyn's gaze hardened. "Then we have to stop it. We have to break this pact and free the town from its grip, no matter what it takes." Grady placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes reflecting the same determined resolve. "I'm with you, Evelyn. We'll find a way to confront this darkness, even if it means going against the entire town. This ends here." As the two prepared to face the unspeakable horror at the heart of Willow Grove, the air seemed to grow heavy with a sense of foreboding, the shadows in the room stretching and writhing as if alive. The town's dark secrets were about to be laid bare, and the reckoning was at hand. The wind howled through the desolate streets of Willow Grove, carrying with it an unnatural chill that seeped into the bones. Evelyn and Sheriff Grady stood on the edge of the town square, where the towering oak tree, twisted and gnarled with age, loomed ominously. Beneath its ancient branches, the townspeople had gathered, their faces obscured by shadows, their eyes dull with the weight of centuries-old secrets. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the crowd, searching for Ethan, the man who had masqueraded as her friendly neighbor, all while serving as the entity's puppet, was nowhere to be seen. But she knew he was here, lurking in the darkness, ready to carry out the town's twisted ritual once more. Grady tightened his grip on the shotgun slung over his shoulder, his eyes never leaving the assembly. "They're preparing for another sacrifice," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "We don't have much time." Evelyn nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. "We have to find Ethan and stop this. If we can expose him, maybe we can break the town's hold over these people." As they moved closer to the crowd, the air grew thick with tension, the oppressive weight of the entity's presence pressing down on them. The townspeople stood in eerie silence, their heads bowed as if in prayer, but there was no reverence in their posture, only fear. Suddenly the crowd parted, and Ethan stepped forward, his expression calm, almost serene. He wore the same friendly smile that had once put Evelyn at ease, but now it sent a shiver of dread down her spine. "Evelyn, Sheriff, Ethan greeted them, his voice smooth and unbothered. "I had a feeling you'd come, but it's too late. The pact must be upheld." Evelyn's eyes blazed with anger. "You've been leading these people to their deaths, feeding them to that thing. How can you live with yourself?" Ethan's smile faltered, and for a brief moment something dark flickered in his eyes. "You don't understand, Evelyn. This town's survival depends on it. Without the pact, Willow Grove would wither and die. I've done what's necessary." Grady stepped forward, his voice filled with authority. "It ends tonight, Ethan. We're not letting you sacrifice anyone else." The crowd stirred uneasily, whispers of fear rippling through them as they looked to Ethan for guidance. But Ethan's confidence wavered, and Evelyn saw a flash of doubt cross his features. "This is your chance," Evelyn said, her voice cutting the tension like a blade. "Break the cycle. End this madness. You don't have to do this." For a moment it seemed like Ethan might waver, but then the shadows around him seemed to grow darker, more malevolent, as if the entity itself was responding to his hesitation. His eyes turned cold, his expression hardening. "I can't," Ethan whispered, more to himself than to them. "I've come too far. The entity demands its due." Evelyn realized then that there was no reasoning with him, no way to appeal to whatever humanity he had left. The entity had its claws deep in him, controlling his every move. Grady raised his shotgun, the metal gleaming in the dim light. "Ethan, step away from the tree. This is your last warning." Ethan's smile returned, but it was empty, devoid of any warmth. "You can't stop this, Sheriff. The town is bound by the pact. If you break it, the entity will consume us all." Evelyn felt a surge of determination. "Then we'll face it together, but this ends tonight." Before Ethan could respond, Grady fired his shotgun into the air, the deafening blast startling the crowd. The townspeople recoiled in fear, their collective murmur growing louder as the air crackled with tension. Evelyn took advantage of the chaos, rushing forward to where Ethan stood. He moved to stop her, but Grady was quicker, tackling him to the ground. The two men grappled in the dirt, their struggle a brutal reflection of the battle for Willow Grove's soul. As they fought, Evelyn reached the base of the oak tree. She could feel the entity's presence, a suffocating darkness that seemed to pulse from the earth beneath her feet. Desperation clawed at her as she searched for a way to sever the town's bond with the creature. Then she saw it, a stone altar hidden among the roots of the tree, its surface etched with the same strange symbols she had seen before. It was the center of the ritual, the place where the sacrifices were made to appease the entity. Without hesitation, Evelyn grabbed a large rock and brought it down on the altar with all her strength. The stone cracked, splintering under the force of her blow, and a strange, otherworldly scream filled the air. The ground beneath her shook violently, as if the very earth was protesting the destruction of its unholy shrine. Ethan, pinned under Grady's weight, let out a cry of anguish. "No, you don't know what you're doing. The entity will destroy us all." Evelyn ignored him, striking the altar again and again until it shattered completely. The symbols carved into its surface flickered and died, the dark energy that had fueled them dissipating into the night. For a moment, everything was still. The wind died down, the oppressive darkness lifting as if a veil had been pulled away. The townspeople, who had been paralyzed by fear, looked around in confusion, the spell over them broken. Grady stood, pulling Ethan to his feet. "It's over, Ethan. The pact is broken." But Ethan's eyes were wide with terror, his body trembling as he stared at the shattered altar. "You don't understand. It's too late." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath the oak tree erupted, splitting open to reveal a gaping chasm. From the darkness below, a monstrous, shadowy form began to emerge, its shape constantly shifting, as if it was made of pure darkness and fear. The entity, freed from its bonds, had been unleashed. The townspeople screamed, fleeing in every direction as the creature rose higher, its presence overwhelming. Evelyn felt her knees weaken as the entity's malevolent gaze fell upon her, its power far greater than anything she had imagined. But even as the darkness threatened to consume her, she knew she couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything. "Grady," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We have to stop it." Grady nodded, his face pale but resolute. He pulled out a flask from his pocket, one he had kept hidden until now. "Holy water," he said, tossing it to Evelyn. "It's our last shot." Evelyn caught the flask, her hands trembling as she unscrewed the cap. The entity roared, a sound that was both a scream and a command as it surged towards them. With all the strength she could muster, Evelyn hurled the flask at the creature. The holy water splashed across its shadowy form, sizzling as it made contact. The entity let out a deafening wail, its form writhing in agony as the holy water burned through it. Evelyn and Grady watched in stunned silence as the entity began to dissolve, its monstrous shape disintegrating into nothingness. The darkness that had plagued Willow Grove for generations was finally being banished. As the last of the entity faded away, the chasm in the earth closed, sealing shut as if it had never been there. The town was silent, the wind carrying away the last remnants of the entity's presence. Evelyn and Grady stood side by side, breathing heavily as they surveyed the aftermath. The town, once gripped by fear and darkness, now seemed strangely peaceful. The townspeople, no longer under the entity's thrall, slowly began to gather, their expressions a mix of confusion and relief. Ethan lay on the ground, his face a mask of despair. Without the entity, his power was gone, leaving him just another broken man in a town full of broken people. Evelyn knelt beside him, her voice soft but firm. "It's over, Ethan. The town is free." He looked up at her, his eyes hollow. "But at what cost? The entity will return. It always does." Grady stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We'll be ready next time. The town will be ready." Evelyn stood, looking out at the town that had once been shrouded in darkness. She knew the battle was far from over, that the entity's influence might one day return. But for now, they had won. Willow Grove was free, and its people could finally begin to heal. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Evelyn felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had come to Willow Grove seeking answers, and in the process, she had uncovered the truth. It was a truth that had nearly destroyed her, but it had also given her the strength to fight back. And in the end, that strength had been enough. The reckoning was over, but a new day was just beginning. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share the video. See you next time.